Greetings, Rabbi Griscott here with your video sermon for Parshat Vayikra. So I saw a meme going around, one of many that's being circulated at this time, directed at the millennial generation. My generation gets a bad rap for being lazy, for complaining too much. So the meme said as follows: your grandparents were called upon to serve in a great world war, to persevere through a Great Depression. You're being called upon to sit on your couch and watch TV. You can do this. Right? Sort of belittling this coronavirus crisis stay-at-home thing as compared to previous generations' hardships. But as is typical of social media, the jungle angry atmosphere, people started piling on the person who posted this with angry comments. That's not fair to belittle the sacrifice that we're making. People are losing their jobs, people are sick, people are literally dying, God forbid, in some cases. And even just the average family that has to be home, work from home with their kids, juggling everything, not having public spaces to go to, going a little bit getting a little bit cabin fever, going stir crazy. You should not belittle those sacrifices. Now, as is typical of a rabbi, I always say the truth is somewhere in between. They're both right. It may be correct that, thank God, we have to have gratitude that what we're going through is not as nearly as bad as the hardships of previous generations. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't also validate what we're going through. A person only has the context of the present, of their own life, and we ought to be present with and validate the very real sacrifice that we are all making and how difficult this actually is. Now, fittingly, we begin the book of Vayikra, which is all about sacrifice, and of course, in a ritual sense, offering a sacrifice, either animals or meal offerings. The word for sacrifice in Hebrew is called a karban. That refers to the physical item being sacrificed, the meal offering or the animal. But the act of sacrifice itself is called hakrava, lehakriv, which means to come close. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, in the plain meaning, it refers to the act of presenting, to present, to bring it close to the altar, to God. But homiletically, and I think just as true, and this resonates with me deeply, it means to come close to God. We come close to God through sacrifice. And why is that exactly? What is the correlation? Well, it's quite simple from a psychological perspective. When we sacrifice, we give something up. We realize our own frailty, our own vulnerability, and indeed our own finiteness. You gain new appreciation, therefore, for that which is infinite, which is God, and how frail we are in comparison. Now, in gaining this insight through sacrifice and through vulnerability, there are two basic human emotions that you can fall back upon. The most basic of human emotions are fear and love. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch points out that in the ancient pagan world, sacrifice was indeed an expression of fear. And so you sacrifice to the god of thunder and rain that he not smite you. So I'm thinking of that because last night here in Overland Park, there was a massive thunderstorm. It was very scary. Anyone who owned dogs, a few congregants told me their dogs were barking and terrified. Thank God our kids slept through it. I did not. But in the ancient world, someone would sacrifice out of terror to the god of thunder. Here, take this offering and don't strike me down. But Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch points out the way that the very first verse, the first unique verse, meaning the second verse after the introductory one, is phrased in Parshat Vayikra tomorrow. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem adam ki akriv mikem karban laHashem. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a person among you brings an offering to Hashem, the four-letter name of God. Now there are two basic names of God. Elohim is the name of God's strict justice. And Yud, He, and Vav, He, the four-letter name, the Tetragrammaton, which we usually just translate as the Lord, that's God's name of compassion. And Vayikra makes a point, every time there's an offering, you offer that offering not to Elohim, but to Hashem. You offer that offering to the God of love, so to speak, the attribute of God, which is compassion. And that is a rebuke to the ancient pagan mindset that sacrifice should be done out of fear. No, it's done out of the other strongest of human emotions, love, to become close to God, l'hakriv. And indeed, I think the sacrifices that we're making could lead to those two emotions. A lot of people are in a lot of fear and anxiety, but it could also lead to, and should lead to, an increase in love for that which is infinite, which is God, but for all those things that sort of transcend us and remind us of our own frailty. And that is our own family, our own friends, first responders, people in the healthcare system, even for government, even if you don't like the individuals who might be in power, but the very free society and the government that we have in our country and that they take care of us. An extra sense of gratitude and love for all these things that transcend our own finiteness, which we don't necessarily always appreciate. And there's another powerful word in that very same verse, the second verse in the Parsha. Daber el b'nei Israel v'yamar talehem adam ki akriv mikem karban laHashem min habehema min habakar umin hatzon takrivu et karbanchem. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a person among you brings an offering, adam ki akriv. The commentaries point out that usually when you want to say a person who does X, Y, Z, the Torah uses the term ish, which means a man. Sometimes it will say ish o isha, a man or a woman. Sometimes just ish. Now, just like in English, where mankind could refer to all people, including women, the word ish could be translated more liberally, not just as man, but as person. But usually the Torah will say ish ki yaseh X, a person who will do such and such. But here it uses the term Adam. Adam is the name of the first human being, but the word Adam in general means a human. And so the verse should be translated as, speak to the children of Israel, Adam ki akriv, when a human brings a sacrifice, when a human being brings a sacrifice. And that speaks to the frailty of the person. It doesn't just say a person, but a human. When God speaks to the prophet Ezekiel, he refers to him as Ben Adam, you son of man. He's highlighting his transcendence, God's, versus the human, mere mortal subject that he is speaking to. The Midrash points out that the word Adam is used to remind us of the first man, Adam, who sinned and fell from grace. As the English expression goes, I'm only human, I'm not perfect. And indeed, that's what's happening with every act of sacrifice. We're reminded of our own Adamness, so to speak, of our own frail humanity and our own mortal being as compared to God. Now, all of this experience also led me to gain new insight and new appreciation. I've had a lot of that, new insights and appreciations into texts and verses and prayers that I hadn't had before. The verse about Jacob, that he has his entire family with him, but his brother Esau is advancing with 400 men. He's afraid his brother still holds a grudge against him, is going to attack him and kill him for having stolen the blessing from their father years earlier. And it says that he transferred his family over the Abok River and he was left alone. Vayivaser Yaakov levado vayeyavek ish imo aralos hashachar. Very poignant verse. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. And we know from the commentaries that this man is God, not God literally himself, but an angel of God, which is really an extension of God. So you can say euphemistically, and Jacob was left alone and he wrestled with God all night. I think that's so universal that it's when we're left alone and we have a sense of our own frailty and we're more isolated that we come to wrestle with God the most. And wrestle has these two connotations. Number one, you feel the tight embrace of God. There's a sense of love. But in the plain meaning, wrestling is also contention. We feel angry at God at the same time. Jacob was also thinking of the sacrifices he might, God forbid, have to make. He says, Pen yikani aim al banim. Pen yavo v'hikani aim al banim. Lest my brother come and strike down my entire family, mothers and children. He was thinking of what he might have to sacrifice, and that led him to a closeness and a wrestling and an embrace with God. What a lovely metaphor for humanity in general. And so I would encourage us at this time that we embrace, no pun intended, that sense of embrace with God, those two human emotions of love and fear. That's a little bit of what I'm feeling now. To be candid, this is what Yisrael means, to struggle with God. I feel that wrestling. It's okay to feel that. We don't just have to be rose-colored and Pollyannish and say we should feel God's love. It's very Jewish to say at this time we should be questioning, why does God do these things? Why are these pandemics? Why do bad things happen to good people? To wrestle contentiousness with God, to wrestle, but at the same time, dialectic, to hold both ideas at the same time, that when we feel that embrace of wrestling, we also feel that embrace of love, as Rabbi Hirsch reminds us. L'hakriv, to sacrifice is to come close and be in real relationship, just like any relationship you might have with marriage and friends, is both to get upset and to love. That's what Becca and my children and me are feeling now, right? Being cooped up at home, we're having a little bit more fights, but we also have more love. It's amazing. Both emotions at the same time. And that's indeed how we should feel now in our relationship with God. Until, as that verse ends, Aralos Hashachar, until the break of dawn, Jacob wrestled until the light at the end of the tunnel, which we hope for us is coming soon. Alot Hashachar, when the dawn breaks, this crisis ends. And we return to normal. Hopefully, we'll be able to retain that sense of Hakrava, to remember the sacrifices that have been made, and the sense of wrestling and embracing God and coming closer to Him. Shabbat Shalom.